Now, it's not an exaggeration to say that today's guest is leading one of the most ambitious and complex projects to transform retirement savings, perhaps ever, perhaps in the world. And we're very honoured to be joined by Chris Curry, Principal of the Pensions Dashboard Programme at the Money and Pension Service. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Sam.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today. So we're talking about pensions dashboards in practice. And as you know, a lot of our audience are professional financial services. So they'll be well aware of pensions dashboard and, financial services periphery around it. But for our consumer listeners, can you give them a bit of an understanding of what is pensions dashboard trying to solve as a program? What's broken?
Yeah, so the idea behind pensions dashboards is that consumers will be able to go online and access all of their pensions information about all of their different pensions just in one place. And all they have to do is provide their own personal details. They don't need to know anything about where their pensions are at the moment. And the reason that's so important is because the pension system in the UK is just incredibly complicated. It's very fragmented. It's very old. So we've had one of the oldest pension systems in the world. And that means that it's built up and it's changed over time. And as with everything else, we just layer complexity upon complexity, which means it's very difficult for people to understand where their own pensions are or how many pensions they have or who they're with or any of these things that in many other areas you just take for granted. And there's also layered on top of that a kind of psychological issue. Pensions are things that happen to old people. And so it's very difficult for people to think about this in advance. And the fact that it's really hard to get that information in the first place means that people tend to not think about pensions until it's too late in their journey. So the idea of pensions dashboards is that really that first step. It helps people find their information. It helps them become comfortable with that information. And from there on, they can then do, hopefully, a lot more to give themselves a better retirement outcome.
So that sounds relatively simple. It's quite simple to explain from a user perspective. From the end consumer perspective, I want to see all of my pensions information in one place, all of my pensions pots in one place. Why is that complex? Where are the actual complexities there? Can you unpick that a little bit for us?
You're right. I mean, it sounds very simple as an idea. I think part of the challenge comes from when you realise there are probably just under 30,000 pension schemes in the UK, and of those, the vast majority are very, very small, with very low levels of membership, kind of a handful or so of members at that. But even if you just look at the ones that cover, say, about 99% of all the pension scheme memberships in the UK, that's still just under 3,000 pension schemes where that information is held. So just trying to be able to search through all that information in itself is a real challenge. If you're an individual as well, if you join a pension scheme, especially in the last 15 years or so through automatic enrolment, the chances are your employer put you into a pension scheme, so it wasn't necessarily an active choice. You might not know who the pension is with because it might not be the same name as your employer. And even if you did, there's been a lot of consolidation in the market over the last few years. So trying to keep hold of what you already knew in the first place, if you did know, is really difficult. And the industry has been changing significantly. I mentioned it's one of the oldest industry. But again, over that period of time, there are so many changes and so many changes of name and so many new entrants and companies taking over other companies that trying to hold on to that information just for an individual is very difficult. Doing it at a system-wide level is really difficult.
So as a user, imagining that when I see my pensions dashboard, it's almost like I would see my ISA in an app, or I would see my current account. I've got totals of my saving pots, just as though I would have totals of my different bank accounts or savings accounts. Is that it? Or are there benefits beyond just being able to see the totals in pensions dashboard?
Yeah, so it's that's definitely part of it. And just seeing that information on any individual pension in itself. I mean, you can do some of that now. If you know where your pension is, you can log on to a portal of your pension provider and see that information. I think what's really important about pensions dashboards is that firstly, you don't need to know where your pension is. And we're expecting people to find significant numbers of pensions. We know there's over £30 billion worth of assets in defined contribution pensions where the companies don't have the contact details for the owners of those assets, for example. So it's really important that we can reunite those people to start off with. But it's seeing all that information together. So, and a really important part of that is the state pension. So you will not only see what you have in your workplace and private pensions, but you will also see your state pension alongside it. And as well as showing you what it's worth now, it will also have some ballpark projections of what that pension might be worth by the time you get to the age at which you can take that pension. So it's not just showing you this is what you've currently got, which, for example, you could do in your ISA or your bank account, but it's also giving you an idea of what that might give you by the time you get to that age at which you can take your pension. Now, of course, it's not guaranteed. There'll be all sorts of contextual information around there to help people understand what this does mean and what this doesn't mean. But actually seeing all that information together in one place, we think is going to be really powerful.
So is that pensions dashboards at launch, and then there are hopes long term to build on more features, more smarts around that, or are you rolling this out in phases?
Yeah, so this isn't the first pensions dashboard in the world. So there are examples in other countries where they've done this, and some have been up and running for 20 years or so. And one thing that we have learned from those is they do iterate. They do change over time. They do build. So actually, although kind of we think the first version of the pensions dashboard, all the information I talked about there will be on that first version. It's really important that we have that. But that's the basic level information that people will have as part of that. What it won't have, for example, which we do see overseas, is things like tools which will allow you to, say, change your contribution level or change your retirement date or things like that to show how you might affect your retirement income in doing things like that. It doesn't have some of the more complex or more detailed information about pensions, things like charging schemes or value for money. So it will have a link to where you can find costs and charges, but it's not going to be there on the dashboard itself. But future iterations might well include things like costs and charges or value for money. It might also include things like pensions in payment, which are currently outside of the scope of pensions dashboards. These are for people who haven't claimed their pension yet, but it might be something that we can build on in the future. And you mentioned about looking at things like ISAs as well. I mean, we know that the financial planning, even financial planning for retirement, is getting more and more complex as people are making more use of different types of asset. Housing wealth as well is another one. And so eventually you can see over time that pensions dashboards will be able to be used in conjunction with other services or merged with other services. You can get a much more holistic view of your finances as well. But that is a lot further down the track. At the moment, we're just focusing on getting the basic pension information, but that will include that projection to the age at which you can take your pension as well.
I suppose it makes sense for that long-term vision to be an integration with, a much more open banking style type of program where you can say, I want to see my pensions data in this dashboard as well as my ISA, as well as something from over here, and I can sort of make that choice as a consumer. Is that the kind of vision that we're talking about?
It is, and I think it's important that although kind of when we launch the first pensions dashboard, it will be a single pensions dashboard. So that's being run by the Money and Pension Service. The Money Helper dashboard will be the first one to be launched. There will be private sector dashboards that come after that. Once we've launched the first one and taken on board the learnings from that and fed those into the standards around how dashboards operate, then we're expecting there to be private sector dashboards as well. And you can see that that's one of the areas where there's likely to be innovation in that space. There'll be people who are already interested in broader finances who'll be looking to bring that dashboard information alongside other financial services information as well. So yeah, we would expect there to be kind of lots and lots of development in this as we go forward. I mean, the things to bear in mind, technology is constantly changing. The world policy is constantly changing. And I think the information that people have is constantly changing. And so all of those things are likely to influence the way that dashboards evolve in the future.
Every field within dashboard has obviously come with, for the user, it will just pop up on my phone or my desktop. But for you've had to corral a whole market, a whole industry to talk to each other about those fields and to standardize information that might be going one way or two ways. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's been difficult there, where the challenges have been, and what kind of bodies have needed to talk, what kind of parties have needed to talk to each other?
No, it's a really good question. And as you said at the start, this is one of the most complex kind of transformation projects I think the UK is, especially in the digital space and certainly in the pensions industry, for quite a while. So there's a number of different things that we've needed to do. I mean, the first thing we needed to do was to get everybody to commit to provide the information for pensions dashboards. We know that dashboards work really well where people can see all of their pensions. And so it wouldn't have worked if we only had a handful of schemes coming in. To do that voluntarily, I think would have been impossible. So we needed legislation. So bringing legislation in creates its own issues. So now it's a parliamentary process. And now there are regulations in place which says that by October 2026, all of those just under 3,000 schemes within scope have to be connected to the infrastructure that we built. So that was the first kind of real challenge is actually just getting the parliamentary time and getting the regulations right and finding it can be done in a way which is not too onerous on the industry, but gives enough information to help consumers. So that's a challenging balancing act in itself. But then, as you say, the industry itself is pretty widespread. There's lots of different parts of the industry in different states of readiness, I think it's fair to say. So we've had to work really hard with them. Mainly two areas, I'd say. One is technology. So they need to be able to connect into the infrastructure that we built, and that's really been the creation of a new industry. So we've needed organizations. We now have 22 organizations who are managing those connections for those schemes. We started off with 19, but there's more coming in every day in a way. So that's really helpful. But they've needed to work out how they're going to work with their clients who are providing the data and with us to make that connection so dashboards work. And we've worked very, very closely with them. I have to say that they've put in an immense amount of work and effort with us in order to make that work. And the whole industry is really stepping up to make sure that dashboards work. So we've needed to work in the technology space around there. But the other real area, of course, is data. And dashboards are only going to be as good as the data that goes through dashboards. If we're seeing nonsense information come through a dashboard, is not going to help anybody in doing that. So, but there's a lot of different aspects of data. First, the data has to exist and it has to be accurate. Then it needs to be in digital format. We've been working on the program. So I've been on the program since 2019, so coming up for 7 years now. And the numbers of organizations we went to where the data was not held digitally, it's been a big shift, I think, to make sure that all data that's required is now in a digital format and is accessible digitally as well. So that's been a big learning curve and a big shift for some parts of the industry, definitely, in doing that as well. So there's also quality as well. So the quality of the data has been really important. So we've had to work with all the schemes and providers. A lot of industry bodies and organisations have been really helpful. So PASA, ABI, Pensions UK, for example. A lot of those organisations have been very good at working with their members to help them get ready for what they need to do for pensions dashboards.
And as I understand it, it's not just a case of having the data in the right format and being able to transfer it to the right places, but also that, as you kind of hinted at earlier, a lot of these pension schemes haven't ever had all the information that they would have today about their members. So how do you think through that? Is it a case of users or consumers having to input their own information to find their pensions and doing sort of partial matching? How does that work?
Yeah, so the main aim is to make it as straightforward as the consumer as it possibly can be. So the only information that the consumer needs to put in is their own personal details. So it will be their name, first name, surname, date of birth. We're asking them to put in their national insurance number if they can as well, because we know that can make a big difference to whether you can find a pension or not. And there'll be address, email information, those kind of things. So it's only things that people should know. What's really important is that then goes through a kind of digital identity verification service, and that's really important for the trust and security of dashboards. That when the 3,000 schemes receive information, they can be confident that the person looking for that information is who they say they are. And we're working with the government's One Login solution in order to provide that digital verification as part of that. But you're right. I mean, there have been numerous data cleaning exercises that have had to happen right the way across the industry, and it's something which the industry's been very aware of, that they have data. And quite often in the past, it's been, if you have data, that's been good enough. Now, in the era of dashboards, you not only need to have the data, you need to know that it's the right data. And so there's been a lot of work across the industry to make sure that the schemes are what they call dashboard ready. So they've checked the information, they've searched as much as they possibly can to make sure that they have up-to-date and current information in all the fields they need. But the real challenge now is once dashboards go live, that's going to have to be at that state all the time. So it's going to be a continuous exercise that schemes have to undertake to make sure that their data is good enough to allow pensions to be found. And there are some new things as well. So value data in some DB schemes, for example, quite often has only been calculated on request or when people are coming up to retirement. Now that needs to be available or be able to be calculated within a 10-day period for people who want to view it on a dashboard. So there are a few changes in there as well. But yeah, this is really going to change the way in which industry views and manages and maintains its data going forward.
Anyone who's worked within a company, who's worked with other companies or organizations, will know the perhaps lack of speed, the difficulty in getting other parties, other organizations, even if there's just two parties involved, to do things. You're talking about industry level change. You already mentioned legislation helping a lot, but beyond that, how have you been able to coordinate this progress?
Yeah, it's been interesting, maybe is the best way to describe it, because it's not just government and industry. So within government, so I work for the Money and Pension Service. The policy is owned by the Department for Work and Pensions. The regulators are the FCA and TPR. As a big government project, we're overseen by what used to be the Infrastructure Projects Authority, part of the Cabinet Office. You can see there's already lots of different bodies involved on the one side. Then with the industry, you've got defined benefit, you've got defined contribution, you've got hybrid schemes, you've got those in the private sector and public sector, you've got contract-based and trust-based. You've got all sorts of different variations. So I think the thing that's really helped is there has been, I think, right the way across the board, a real willingness for it to work. I think people can see the benefit of pensions dashboards. There's definitely been parts of the industry which have been slower to come to realise the benefits than others. But the main organisations involved, as I mentioned earlier, the ABI, Pensions UK, PASA, all of the big bodies who are really representing large parts of the industry have been really helpful in bringing their members with them. I think not just telling them they have to do it because of regulation, but also letting them know just how much their members will benefit from having pensions dashboards. So there's been an awful lot of communication and engagement, an awful lot of collaboration. We've tried where we can, as much as possible in the government programme, to make it as transparent as possible as well, to really help people see not just kind of where we're going, but how we want to get there. And what the end state will look like. And through a combination of all of those different things and a lot of sheer hard work in many different places right the way across the industry and all those stakeholder groups, we've managed to make really significant progress and be where we are today, which is we've now got, I think, 60 million workplace and personal pension scheme records connected to the infrastructure. We think we need 80 million in total within scope. So we're 3/4 of the way there, which is brilliant progress.
And I suppose for those individual organisations who are involved in doing things like formatting data, updating their databases, updating their standards, there are other benefits involved for them as well. They can then start to use that data for their own digital transformation projects and apps.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the big side benefits of pensions dashboards, not just for the consumers, but for the industry, has almost been kind of the modernization of data and the use of data within pensions, which is brilliant. But we've also been very aware right the way through that the pensions dashboards is not the only thing happening in pensions. It's a very busy policy space, lots of development. So there's been lots of other pieces of work going on in the defined benefit world, for example, schemes moving to buy-in and buy-out, and like GMP equalisation exercises and things like that. But they're all data linked and related. So actually getting your data better for dashboards is also good for other parts of the business as well, and making sure that it works well. And as you say, the kind of digital transformation that you could see happening in the industry over the next few years as digital transformations generally kind of accelerate. I think this has been a very necessary first step, both for consumers, but also for the industry as well.
So would you say that would you expect it to change the culture of the industry in terms of it being this is such a massive exercise for everybody to work together to do something to align with the same standards? Would you say it sort of changes expectations as to what can be done in the future and how quickly things can be done? And
I'm not sure. I think I mean it certainly will lead to some changes. I mean cultural change is always difficult, and it's always, as we alluded to earlier, it's always slow. I think in changing, but I think this will change working practices. This will change the prioritization of data in the kind of, and administration to a certain extent, in the hierarchy of kind of costs that the industry faces. Now data is going to have to be seen as being a very important and almost a strategic asset in how it's used going forward. So I think it will definitely change that. And I think that change will open up the possibility for other pieces of work. We know that, for example, in the defined contribution space, there's lots of discussion and policy work by DWP and others around small pot consolidation and things like that. We know that consolidation generally is something in the industry. Better data is something that's really necessary for that as well. So you can see that kind of, although, and we've been blamed quite a lot for a lot of additional cost in the industry over the past few years by schemes needing to get dashboard ready, but they're actually, I think part of that we would say, well, you probably should have had data of this quality anyway, in order to serve your customers, but it's also a real business asset going forward as well, and there's a real opportunity to make something of it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot on this podcast about the importance of having your data right in the right places for AI, obviously,
Yeah.
a lot recently. That's just one context in which before that we were talking about big data, in which you can only really achieve the kind of digital transformation that your consumers are demanding with that kind of large scale formatting and standardization of data. So there must be vast benefits, not just to be had now and in the imminent future, but long term as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we spent a lot of time working with the industry on making sure that the data standards were the right ones. So we know that there is now that standardization, at least in the fields that we require for dashboards. But as I said, dashboards evolve, and I can see that at some point in the future, those data standards, well, we know data standards will evolve because data changes all the time. We know the code of connection, we know the technical standards. All of those things are really, really important to make sure that the system works well, but they also kind of can help set standards in other areas going forward as well. And I think all of those things are things which will be evolved, they will be developed, probably in ways that we can't quite imagine at the moment. But when you were talking about big data and AI, the thing that came to mind is, it's for me, is that all of those things are only as good as the data that goes into them. So there's lots that you can do that can help interpret, that can work with data, that can help ultimately, I think, help individuals and consumers get more from their pensions, but only if the information is right.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be an expectation from consumers, give it a few years. I want to be able to talk to my pension pots. I want to be able to ask my agent to go and find my pension pots, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
When you press the big red button, I know it's not a big red button, but say you were going to roll it out to everybody at the same time, you'd be standing back from your own dashboard watching what? What would you be expecting to tick up? What kind of metrics are you looking at? What kind of goals are you looking at for success criteria?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So we're not really looking in success criteria as numbers as such. I think so. We'd expect there to be a lot of demand and take up over a period of time. I think, and this is really interesting from my perspective. Pensions dashboards, I think, it's really interesting. But for me, success is that in 5 years' time, we look back and pensions dashboards are taken for granted. It's just part of the landscape. People know that if they want to find out about their pensions, they go to a pensions dashboard and they know where to find one. That's success. So whether like 95% of the population have done it by then or 15% of the population have done it by then, it's not necessarily a numbers game. We think it will be relatively large numbers based on the international experience that we've seen, but it's very hard to kind of tie that down. What's more important for us is that kind of people see the information that they need to see. Pensions dashboards by themselves are not going to transform the way that people engage with their pensions. It's not going to make them understand everything. It's not going to give them the confidence to make changes. It's not going to help them understand directly, but it's the first step. It will be hopefully where they learn firstly that they have pensions. That's an important first step, that they get a rough idea of roughly how much they've got and broadly what that might be worth in retirement. And if they want to know more, they know where they can get that information from as well. So they can start out doing all of that by itself. So I think success is people kind of having a positive experience from going on that dashboard. Success is also, interestingly, when they go to their provider to ask questions about the pension they've seen on their dashboard, they get a good service from them as well. So we're working very closely with the industry so they know what's happening and when and what they can expect. And some of our research is very much focused on what can we tell industry to expect when we launch, so they can be ready for it as well. And then slowly over time, I think that will then end up as people having better outcomes in retirement because they know where all their pensions are. They're actually able to claim all their pensions, whereas in the past they might not have known about some, so they'd have been left with the providers. They'd have been able to do more financial planning than they're currently doing at the moment. So they'll potentially have been able to vary contributions or be more informed about when they want to go into retirement or working part-time, for example, and maybe have a better handle on how they've managed their pensions over time. But none of that is the sort of thing we'd expect to happen instantly. This is trying to change a culture. This is trying to change the consciousness of the population about pensions. And so when people talk about pensions at the moment, if you ask them, people tend to shut down the conversation. It's like, oh, well, I know I've got a pension, but I don't know much about it, or I've got no idea, or someone else looks after that. Ideally, they'll be saying, oh yeah, I looked at mine couple of months ago, it was doing okay. Or, yeah, I've got 4, but I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with them. But at least they know something about them. It's just trying to make that first step so people can then have a chance of doing something with it.
Yeah, it's massive cultural change. I think it's not a massive jump to say that for people to be able to answer that question or say, I know about my pension, that you would see usage, activity, engagement
Yeah.
around pensions increase as well. And like you say, it's not the only step, but it's a very big step. My last question for you is, why would you do this? why would you take on this project? What for you will be the day when you go, I've got what I wanted out of this personally?
Yeah, well, I think just as we've just been talking about, it's that opportunity to make a fundamental difference. I mean, this policy, the pensions dashboards, when they are there, have the potential to change everybody's retirement, and I mean virtually everybody. So this isn't something we're looking at kind of 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year even. This is a decades long thing that we want to achieve. So I spent all my working life really. So I started off working for the government and then the ABI for a couple of years, but the last 25 years working for the Pensions Policy Institute, so a research organisation where we try to improve policy making through evidence. Pensions dashboards do that, but in a much more direct way. This is actually improving outcomes directly, giving people an opportunity to do better. And so when the opportunity came up, it was like, well, this could be a real game changer. This could make a real difference in people's lives. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's working in an area that I love with organizations that I've worked with over a long period of time. And so working together with them collaboratively and building almost that coalition in order to deliver something which will make a massive difference to the lives of virtually everybody in the country is a real opportunity, and one that I still don't regret taking on, even though it's now 7 years since we started.
Sometimes on a Monday evening, but most of the time don't regret. Yeah, it's an amazing legacy. It's, to be able to say I've changed the retirement outcomes of potentially everybody in the country for years to come. It is amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like that conversation you overhear in the pub where someone talks about what they've seen on their pensions dashboard. You're able to think, yeah, I was involved in that, and that was good.
Not a legacy everybody can say they've left. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for your insights. We'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much, Sam. It was my pleasure.